We're going to get started in just a few seconds. Let a few more folks trickle in. All right, it is 3 o'clock on the dot. I promised to get this party started right on time. It is my absolute pleasure today to introduce you to Fairfax County Public Schools. They are here to discuss with you fewer tickets, happier users, I mean, who wouldn't want that? Custom Jamf front ends using Jamf API and Google Apps scripts. So please give a big, warm welcome and round of applause to Fairfax County Public Schools.
Welcome, good afternoon. Thank you for being here and joining us. This is Fewer Tickets, Happier Users, Custom Jamf Front Ends using Jamf API and Google Apps Scripts. A quick introduction of our team.
So I'm Michael Dobbs.
Richard Chan.
And I'm Griffin Payne. And collectively, we have over 40 years of experience providing frontline technical support to end users for Fairfax County Public Schools. It's only during the last 2.5 years we've joined the Endpoint Configuration team as programmers, which has allowed us to develop the tool you're about to see to these frontline technical support positions. A quick overview of Fairfax County Public Schools. We are the 9th largest school division in the US. We have 199 schools and centers. There are 180,000 students. There's 25,000 full-time staff and 250,000 devices, 27,000 iPads, and 1,000 Macs. So FCPS uses sites to refer to different schools and centers, not a Jamf site. FCPS only uses one Jamf site, fortunately. The tool you're about to see was also developed using Jamf Pro, so it may not be applicable for Jamf School. Quick rundown of the agenda that we're going to provide here. This is the introduction and session objectives, our story, why we needed a solution, the Jamf API basics, Google Apps Scripts basics, Google Apps Scripts and Jamf API integration, and the key takeaways and hopefully some Q&A. I'm going to hand it off to Richard.
Thank you. All right, so as a school district, our primary objective is to reduce technology-related disruptions in our schools and our admin centers. Currently, we consist of a team of 7, 6 of us endpoint configuration programmers, and 1 manager. We manage and support 4 separate MDM systems: Intune, MECM, Google Admin Console, and Jamf Pro. So with all the demands that we get, we have to prioritize quick resolutions without giving away the keys to the kingdom. All right. So we have 170 technology support specialists throughout our 199 sites. We call them T-Specs for short. They're basically the Tier 2 frontline support staff. They support Windows, Chrome OS, Mac OS, and iPad OS devices on sites. So with all the demands that they get on school sites, it's really hard to find training for them to get up to speed on any of our centrally managed systems. So we basically try to make their lives easier, being the central system admins. So this is a demo of the tool that we created using the Jamf Pro APIs and Google Apps Scripts. Right now you can see that we're checking the device info of an iPad based on the serial number. You can see like the enrollment user, when the last inventory update was. And then here's a generate report button for a specific school site. So we're using South Lakes High as an example. Here's a list of devices that were enrolled at this site.
So that's the kind of view you'll get if you just have view permissions to a device. You'll notice there were no action buttons available for you to take any action against that device.
So this is the view that they'll get if they do have admin rights. So again, this is checking status of an iPad. And from here, you can see that there's a clear passcode command button. From here, we're going to search a MacBook using our site-based asset tag. From here, you can see additional buttons for this device. So there's a get lapsed password for our local admin accounts. There's the Redeploy Jamf framework, which is currently not available in the Jamf Pro console, but it's available through the Jamf Pro API. Also, a helpful one is the software updates command. Even though we send out the updates centrally, there's always those one-off devices. So this is a quick, easy way for the on-site support to target one device without us having to add them to a static or a smart group. And then at the bottom, you can see some logging. That's going to show who last initiated a command to a particular device. All right, and so this slide basically just covers what you saw in the video demo and how our frontline techs use it. And now I'm going to hand it over to Michael. He's going to go over how the tool was created.
Thank you, Richard. So again, my colleagues kind of went over who we are. They went over what we built, and they went over why we built it. I'm going to go over how we built it so that you can go back and kind of have at least a little bit of confidence knowing that you can go back and build this tool for your environment, customized for your needs. We in FCPS, we built this because there wasn't a product out there that would satisfy exactly what we were looking for, so we built our own. As we talk about the Jamf API, you'll find information about API roles, which is a set of permissions. You'll find information about API client, which is a client ID and a secret. That's basically your username and password just for your API tool. That's used to get a bearer token, which we'll go over later. Some great resources for the Jamf API are first the Jamf API reference site, which will describe in plain text exactly what each API endpoint does. For example, how to return file vault information for a specific computer. And it will give you examples of kind of the response you might get if you call that API endpoint. Note it does not cover all possible returns and parameters. When you're building a tool, you're probably going to want to run this actually against your environment because you get more information back. That's where Jamf's Try It Out website comes in handy. It's on your server already. And once you generate an API client ID and secret or username, you can access this and run commands directly against the API. So you can try it out and see the actual response that you would get using that API endpoint. Why did we use Google Apps Script? One, it's a cloud-based solution. I didn't have to set up another Windows server or a Linux server or install Apache, manage permissions. I had to do none of that. I was up and running in my environment in 5 seconds. There is pre-built authentication if you're already using Google Workspace. I didn't have to build any authentication protocols. And finally, I'm able to leverage our pre-existing groups and user attributes that are already in Google Workspace. Now, you could apply these same techniques to any other platform like Azure and Entra with PowerShell or your ITSM system. There are many ways you can use these techniques, but we built it in our environment because we have Google Apps already. Here's a quick overview of how we create a Google Apps Script project. We're going to go over each of these sections with a screenshot or two. I'll just go right ahead. So creating a Google Apps Script project, deceptively easy. You just log into Google Drive, do new, more, Google Apps Script. Boom, you've got a Google Apps Script. And you didn't have to ask anybody to evaluate a new third-party software platform. I didn't have to ask for permission to build this tool. Google Apps Script has both client-side code and server-side code. As you create files in your project, you'll either create a script, which is server-side code, winds up with a GS extension, or an HTML file, which is your client-side code. That's where your HTML, your CSS, and your client-side JavaScript will run. Everything in Google Apps Script is JavaScript. There's no other language involved. As you develop a project, it is important to securely store your API credentials. Those are your secrets. And if your client ID and secret has permission to change things, you want to make sure you secure those credentials properly. You can do that in Google Apps Script via a script property. So in project settings, you can create properties and put in your client ID and secret and your server name. And then in your code, you can reference that via the properties service to get script properties. So this is how I pull out my API client ID and client secret from my project settings. For version control and publishing, you always want to be able to kind of test a new feature out before you publish it to your end users. The first thing you have to do is make a new deployment, your very first version. And it's simple. You just do deploy, new deployment. The key component is going to be execute as. You're going to execute it as yourself, or ideally, a service account, because the project needs the permissions that you or your service account have. The other option is run as current user. You don't want to use that when developing this kind of tool. When you actually deploy new versions, instead of doing a new deployment, you're going to manage deployments, edit your deployment, and then create a new version. You can add a description, and this is important because it maintains the same URL. If you create a new deployment every time, your URL changes. So this is one of those tricks we stumbled across, like why do we have to keep changing the website or the bookmark? This was key. Now, once you publish a Google Apps Script project, everyone in your Google Workspace has access to it. Obviously, that's a bad thing. I don't need Susie in kindergarten having access to my script, or anyone else who's not part of IT. We can do this in the do-get function, which happens every time someone accesses the page. And I'll walk through how we do that. So it does a check for permissions function, which I'll show you in a later. And then if they have permission, they get index.html, which is the site. If they don't have permission, they get something completely different that just says access denied. So that's how you can take a Google Apps Script project and kind of restrict access, even though it's running as your account. Going into more details about this check for permissions function that you can customize to your site, this is how it gets the active user. Again, all I have to do is use this Google function, session get active user, get email. I have the email address of who's logged in. I don't have to create a login page. Amazing. Once I have that user object, I can then get attributes about it. So I can get the OU path. In this case, for endpoint configuration users, we get view and global and a special EC access. For service desk, they get view and global. And then our T-specs, who are our site support staff, they initially get just view access. We can give more specific permissions by leveraging groups. So in this case, I've got additional permissions that go out via what groups you are in. And we access this via the admin directory groups list. In this case, if you're in my view group, you also get view permissions. And if you're in my EC group, you also get access EC permissions. The cool stuff comes next, once you build a mapping table. The code at top checks the list of groups I'm a member of against my mapping table. So if I'm a member of Aldrin LM T-specs at fcpschools.net, which was already set up. Then I start populating an array of strings that I have access to. In this case, I get Aldrin LM, and Aldrin Elementary, because nothing's ever that simple. If I'm Annandale High, those are the things I get permission to. We'll access this array later in determining if a user can make changes to a device. Of course, we need logging. We need to get an audit trail of who ran what command and kind of some stats on how much people are using this site. We chose to use just a Google Sheet for logging, but Google Apps Script natively supports BigQuery, and you can likely integrate any other logging system that you would like to integrate with Google Apps Scripts. In this case, again, we just kind of log everything to a sheet, and it looks like this. So I can go in and easily filter by who ran what command. I can see the timestamp, kind of the severity of what they did. If they cleared a passcode, that's in here. You can also see there's the lapse commands and the file vault keys. So we talked a little bit about how to set up Google Apps Script. Now let's talk about Google Apps Script and the Jamf API. This is the cool stuff. So first, we're going to get a bearer token. We're then going to retrieve data from Jamf. We're going to send commands to Jamf, such as that clear passcode command. And then finally, we'll go over how to map those per device permissions. So first is the bearer token. And my apologies, we did not expect a room this deep when we were taking screenshots and making the presentation. So the slides will be in GitHub later. And of course, you'll be able to review the code in GitHub as well. The short version is you use your client ID and your client secret. You build a payload with that information. And then you use the URL app fetch command to get a temporary bearer token. Kind of when you access the website, it gets you a certificate. This is just a temporary access token to your API. Here's the cool stuff. And it's 4 lines of code. It's so simple once you see it in action. So this is how we're going to get the details of a computer. The first step is to generate the URL that you're going to list. So I have my server URL. I have the endpoint I'm going to access. And then I have the unique ID for the computer. Line 2 is I'm building my connection options object. So I'm getting information. I attach some headers. That's where my bearer token goes. And then finally, I'm telling it I want a JSON response. Line 3 is where I actually send that command to Jamf and return the data. So I'm using URL fetch app fetch, and I'm fetching the data from that URL with my options. And then line 4 is where I'm parsing the response back. So you'll see json.parse response.getContext text. That's it. I have now an object in my code that represents the entire computer. And every detail about it that Jamf has access to, okay, almost all the details that Jamf has access to, are available via the API. Let's say I want to then send a command. And in this case, I'm going to update a mobile device group to add a device to that static group. It's the same kind of thing. I build my URL based on my server name, the endpoint I'm going to access, and then in this case, the group ID that I want to modify. 2 is where I'm making my body. So I am putting in the group name, and then I'm telling it which mobile device I want to act upon, and then I'm going to either add or remove it based on the command. 3 is where I'm kind of setting my options. Instead of getting information, it's called patching, where I'm modifying an existing element. And then I attach my headers, I set my content types, again, JSON, and I finally attach the payload of how I want to change. Finally, do the response. So use URL fetch app again to fetch the data. It's basically just sending a web request using the URL and the options we built. Finally, how can we confirm or limit access so that you can only send a command if, for example, you're an Aldrin Elementary T-spec, you can only send commands to Aldrin Elementary devices? Well, this is how. It's just an if statement with three options in this case. If user permissions access global equals true, great, you're in, you're a global admin. If not, we have our or statement. Then I'm checking against the user permissions object we created earlier and the access site array, and I'm saying, does that include, in this case, the room of my device? If yes, great. If not, well, I'm also going to check the asset site. That's a custom extension attribute we have. So I can check it against all three of those variables to see if you are allowed to make changes or send commands to this device. We are constantly reinvesting in this tool. It took us about a week for the initial version, took us about a month for further revisions to kind of add some features, but the payoff has been huge. It is literally fewer tickets and happier users. Our techs have accessed this custom site 10,000 times in the 9 months since we launched it, and they have cleared passcodes 125 times. They've retrieved 151 file vault keys and 678 lapsed passwords. That means there's 954 tickets that did not come to our group that the site tech was able to resolve on their own without assistance from us. That is time saved. That is money in the bank. This opens up huge opportunities to delegate responsibility for very specific actions to either technical folks or non-technical folks who don't have the time to learn Jamf Pro and who you don't want to give the keys of the kingdom to. They need to do a very specific job, and we can give them direct access so they don't have to ask us for help or file a ticket. I do want to let you know we did use AI and large language models in the development of this tool. They weren't that great in figuring out which Jamf API endpoint to call, but when figuring out, oh, what's this JavaScript error code? Or how do I do a dialog box in HTML and CSS? They were amazing. And the resources out there for HTML and CSS and JavaScript are fantastic already. That's why we didn't go over that in this presentation. Hopefully, we have given you a little peek into what's possible and have given you enough confidence to try. You can go back to your enterprise or your school if you have Google Apps Script, and you might be able to build a tool that saves 1,000 tickets. I do want to acknowledge the GitHub repo of Magic Hat Inc. This was my Rosetta Stone for how to integrate Google Apps Script and the Jamf API, because the hardest thing is to get started, and this got me started. That's one of the things I love about working in Jamf with the JNUC and the Jamf community is we all share. Some of the best things we learn at JNUC are just the one-off conversations or people sharing code, either in Slack or in Jamf Nation. We all help each other. And so that's one of our goals, why we made this presentation, is we wanted to share and hopefully help someone else. That is the end of our presentation. We were a little faster than we expected. So we have lots of time for questions.
Awesome, great job. Can we get a round of applause first? That was amazing. All right, questions. Let me come to you. Hi. Yes.
Hi, didn't want to yell. For your array of schools, do you guys have to manually update that? Do you guys have an automated process for that? I mean, I imagine the schools don't change that often, but some of us may have more dynamic environments. How would you think to approach that?
So we have a manual list. There was just no easy way for us to translate the site name of the Google group name and then automatically create the strings that were necessary. And part of that is because other groups are responsible for naming conventions, and they don't always match. So it was easiest for me to just spend about an hour or two going through and copying and pasting stuff into a spreadsheet and then generating the lines I needed. You could absolutely do this in a more dynamic way, or you could use a Google Sheet as your source of truth for what strings a certain group has access to. But we chose to do it directly in the code.
Question over here.
Was there an initial use case that made it worth it to put the effort into developing this?
So the first one was actually clearing iPad passcodes. We did get some of those requests, and sometimes from non-technical folks, or that we don't have an on-site T-spec every day at every school. So that was critical for us to be able to deliver that functionality and save time. Because when you've got a first grader sitting in the classroom with an iPad that's locked, they can't do anything with it. And it's very frustrating. So if we can speed up that response time from a day to 5 minutes, or go see Mr. Johnson down the hallway, that was our first critical use case. The second one was actually, and it's why we built the groups functionality in, was a Wi-Fi issue. We were migrating from one Wi-Fi configuration profile to 200 different ones to diversify some wireless, and that's a challenge because you have to remove the old profile before the new profile goes on, or if the new profile goes on first, when the old one gets removed, it removes the password. So this was a way to empower our local site T-specs to be able to add them to a group, which then removes the bad profile, and then they remove them from the group, and the profile automatically goes back down. So again, it takes from having to submit a ticket to I can give it T-spec directions, and in 10 minutes they fix their own problem. That was a real big time saver for us.
Something I want to add on top with Michael, and I forgot to mention this earlier, is our on-site T-spec support, they don't have access at all to any of our MDM systems. Like, so not even read access. Well, Google Admin Console, they can read just device data, but as far as all our other systems, they don't have access. So for a long time, they were always forced to create those tickets, which would then escalate to our team. And when we joined and we saw the flow of tickets, it just became too repetitive. And I'm pretty sure all of us here do not want repetitive tickets on a daily basis. So,
James, do you have a question?
I have two questions. My first one is, how long did it take you to develop this solution? And my second one is, how long did it take you to integrate it with your team?
Integrate with?
To integrate the product with your team.
With our TM?
With your team.
Oh, team.
Like your IT team.
Thank you. The IT team, yes. So initial development was about a week for about a proof of concept. So that's about 40 man hours. And I would say over the past 9 months, we've probably invested another 120 hours in new features or refinements to increase its usability. In terms of getting those 199 T-specs or sites to use this tool, that is a slow journey. They are obviously very busy, very limited training time, which is why we tried to simplify things as much as possible. Part of it is honestly just word of mouth. Our local site T-specs talking to each other, saying, hey, have you seen this cool tool I just used to solve a problem? Part of it is also tickets do still come into us, and it's hard sometimes, but I will close the ticket saying, hey, T-spec, you can do this on your own now. Here's the directions. Go do it yourself. So it's a bit of that tough love of, hey, I built you a tool, go use it.
Any other questions? Yes.
I'm just curious, so you mentioned that your on-site techs don't have access to your MDM product, even read-only. Is there like a security reason or another reason that you don't give them read access with like delegated access to just run the clear passcode action on an iPad? I guess I'm wondering you've obviously taken the effort to develop this, and this obviously takes effort to maintain versus, say Jamf maintaining their own product. So, where was that tipping point? Or what was the decision behind that?
So let me first tell you, I am not a Jamf expert. None of us are. We've only been using Jamf for 1.5 years or 2.5 years. It might be possible to delegate the very precise permissions in the Jamf roles and features, but when I looked at it, I didn't see the ability to base those permissions off of room attributes or extension attributes. We could do it based off of sites, but I will tell you a Jamf customer success person misheard me, or I misspoke, and thought we had 200 Jamf sites. And the next week we were meeting with someone else who was basically telling us, you shouldn't have 200 sites. And when they looked, oh, one site, you're good, great, golden. Let's give some time, meeting over. So you can't, if you had a limited number of Jamf sites, you might be able to do something similar. But we don't want to give keys to the kingdom to be able to erase the superintendent's iPad remotely to 199 different people. We got to keep that pretty close. What we have discovered is in some other MDMs as well, using those RBAC type permissions can be very difficult and don't offer the level of granularity that we want. And so we have started building tools for other MDMs using this same kind of solution. For example, our site T-specs have read access to the Google admin console, but they can't do anything. So we have built tools to help them move devices between OUs or remotely power wash devices or deprovision devices. If the device is in an OU, they should be able to access. We are about to start our Intune journey for Microsoft. We'll see how that goes.
We've heard that many times.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Going once, going twice.
All right.
Well, thank you. Let's just do one more round of applause. They were amazing, so knowledgeable. Thank you.